Hello everyone and welcome to my little video review of Courtship of Princess Leia. For those who tuned in into my Jedi Search live stream and wondered why I was doing this as a video when I, sort of said that I would do a live stream for basically any expanded universe novel, it's for the simple fact that while I'm ready to reread all of the other expanded universe novels that I have read so far and do, detailed chapter by chapter breakdowns of them, I am really not ready to do the same with Courtship of Princess Leia. I was very, very unsatisfied and, to be honest, very pissed off with my reading experience. And I wanted to, alternatively to doing a whole live stream, just capture my thoughts quickly, as far as I'm able to remember them now that they are still relatively fresh on my mind. And I thought a video would be more appropriate, to do this. So I'm gonna just, quickly start with what I think is pretty good about the book, what I think is bad about it, and then just give my summarizing thoughts towards the end. So, the first praise I can give this book, and this comes from partly a cynical, ironic point of view, but also is a genuine praise as well, is that it's fast-paced. It's action-focused, it's quick. There of course is plenty of dialogue, but it's genuinely not meandering. It moves from point A to point B with a pretty fast pace throughout the entire book, and that is something I can genuinely admire. I think a lot of books are, bloated in an unnecessary way with prose and with useless information or with stupid stuff that is not needed. And I think Courtship found a pretty nice balance for being quick, for being, just not meandering. Now, as I said, it's also a bit, a bit cynical of me to say this because, of course, I appreciate it considering I have to read less about it. But no, in general, I have to admit this is a good way to write books, and more books ought to be wrote in that manner, um, ought to be written in that manner. Pardon. So, the next praise I have for it is that the world building, and this is something that genuinely a lot of people believe, is that the world building is pretty nice. We get introduced to the planet of Dathomir, the Dathomirian culture of the Night Sisters, and also the Hapis cluster. They are interesting additions to the Star Wars lore. They are pretty unique in what we've seen so far, and I can appreciate that. Um, I cannot really I don't know what about a lot of the stuff that happens with these cultures as we progress further into the expanded universe. And even if I knew, I wouldn't really attribute the, let's say, possible good storytellings with these cultures specifically to this book. I have to stick with what the book gives me and not only with what it establishes and what it offers other writers to use and write upon. So I will say they are interesting cultures. They are pretty unique. I like them. I have a few criticisms. I will come to them later, but so far I think they are pretty well done. Um, Also, mischaracterization will be a big part of this little review, but the characters I think are nicely and appropriately characterized are Luke and C-3PO. Luke is sort of, this wandering Jedi searching for wisdom from the prequel era Jedi, from the Galactic Republic Jedi. Um, so in this book specifically, he has a mission to find the Thor, which is a ship full of Jedi apprentices that Yoda was on. He wants to find out basically what happened to this ship, what's the story behind it. Is there maybe some knowledge left that Luke can utilize to build up a new Jedi Academy? Um, I think that is a pretty interesting thing for Luke to do. It's of course the logical thing for Luke to do, as this is his primary interest for now, and that was a very good decision to let him do that. Also, towards the end, there's a little action scene where Luke flies the Falcon. He's basically in like some sort of um, mode where he's very directed by the Force. It was nice. It was an interesting little you know, little showcase of what Luke is capable of doing. It didn't felt like, oh, like it was some form of God, like some, some overdone God mode. I think it was nice. It was pretty short also. And yes, C-3PO was a nice little character because he essentially served like as comedic relief, not necessarily in a bad way, but more like, providing humorous dialogue throughout the book. He made a little song even about Han Solo, where he sings about, oh, Han Solo, what a man, what a wonderful man. That was pretty fun, I have to admit, and I like that. Um, Also, Han is one of the targets of my criticisms, but he genuinely makes two very good decisions in this book, which is the first one, leaving the New Republic as a general. Um, some may wonder why this would be a good decision. It is because the New Republic is a pretty shitty organization um in this book, which seems to be a weird trend that the Bantam era books have, put the New Republic on, especially also towards with their, sort of weird feelings towards Han. The New Republic really seems to hate Han. We've had this little tidbit also on my Jedi Search live stream, but it definitely was present in this book as well, and I will come to what I mean by that a bit later. And yeah, another thing I really liked, and that I have to admit, is the cover of the book. The cover is pretty nice. Han Solo looks pretty well done. Of course, Princess Leia herself is the highlight of this cover. It's her dress, of course, her cleavage as well. Obviously, Princess Solda is on it. I'm not a fan of Princess Solda. He's not the worst part of this book, but he contributes to it. We will get to that a bit, shortly. But yeah, I think it's a nicely designed cover. It's pretty neat. Now, the bad. So for my criticisms, let me just briefly give you the introduction of the story, like into the story. So Han, as we know from Wraith Squadron, which actually was published later on, even though it plays before Courtship of Princess Leia, Han was very busy with Wraith Squadron, with searching for Warlord Singe and battling Warlord Singe. Han Solo makes his return to Coruscant in this book, and this is used as justification. So just remember that he's described to be very tired, very, very tired. He's been fighting constantly, searching for Singe constantly. Same thing is going on with Leia. She's also very tired, which is used as justification of them essentially, not formally, but essentially splitting up in this book to make room for the other love interest in this little triangle, which would be Prince Isolde himself. Um, Prince Isolde is the prince of the Hapes cluster, a matriarchal society that is described to be very rich in resources, in money, in also simple space. Like it has a lot of planets under its reign, and the New Republic apparently is in dire need for resources because it needs those to fight Warlord Singe. And so the Hapis cluster, knowing this, offers to marry off Princess Leia, being herself a princess, of course, of the destroyed Alderaan, to Princess Solda in exchange for resources to combat Singe. Now, there's a few criticisms that start there, like originate from this point, and sort of flow naturally into the following points. So let me just start here. Um, I don't think there's enough justification given why the New Republic specifically now is in such need of those resources that the Hapes cluster can provide. The Rebel Alliance seemed to be perfectly fine, um, battling the Empire at its peak, which I would argue was when the first Death Star with Tarkin was fully operational. Uh, it managed just fine. Um, and the fact that now the New Republic is in such like immediate need, not only dying, like very, very immediate it needs them now. There's no other chance than to get them now in this moment. And I think this justification is pretty shaky. Same with um, the being like Han and Leia being deprived, used as a explanation of why this book is essentially happening. I think it's a very shaky foundation that this plot is standing on. It's not very well explored why the New Republic would really need them now. It's quickly introduced. It's glossed over pretty quickly as well. um, you don't really dwell on that point too much. It's just to get the conflict going. Um, this naturally flows into Leia being mischaracterized. Um, Leia is being described. So first of all, there's an interesting concept here, which is Leia doesn't seem to be particularly fond of Isolde when this book starts and they meet. But she is considering the deal not because she has any feelings for him, but because New Republic, the New Republic is her responsibility, and she feels as though she should do whatever is necessary um, to help the New Republic in its fight against the Imperial remnants. But as we get towards, leaving Coruscant and slowly approaching the Dathomir section of this book, is there is this weird evolution in Leia in which she genuinely seems to fall for Isolde, mostly because Han is pretty jealous. Now, Han being jealous is something that I think the book wants us to believe is unreasonable and, short-sighted. But Han makes pretty good points on why he is jealous because Leia seems to be very openly, like especially in front of Han, she's very openly fond of Isolde. She openly considers it in front of him, which of course would make a normal person angry. And the fact that she dismisses it in a pretty cold way, like I remember she asks him like, "Oh, because Isolde asks her out on a date, and she asks Han whether he's bothered by it, and I, it felt vindictive almost to like the way these two characters were written. And I think a lot of people misunderstand like the bickering aspect of their relationship from the OT and believe that, making cruel remarks and just not teasing each other, but genuinely insulting each other and provocating each other in a way that is inappropriate, I would say, that this is a natural part of bickering. It is absolutely not. Their relationship isn't conventional. There's a lot of teasing going on. It's very playful. I don't think this book portrayed their interactions as any sort of playfulness. I felt it was very cruel. It was angry on both parts, in a way that doesn't fit the character, that wouldn't even fit the character in during A New Hope. And I did not quite understand why this was necessary. Um, Now the next, like the criticism following that is Leia. Actually, she cheats on Han in this book. So at the end, basically, sort of at the end of the Coruscant arc, of the little Coruscant arc in the beginning, um, Leia kisses Isolde when he once again wants to convince her to go to Hapes with her. She kisses him like of her from her own volition. She initiates the kiss, and she is described as forgetting the memory of Han in this second. Um, I, 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 I'm not sure what to make of this, really. It felt unnecessary. It felt I was sort of a mix of sad and angry with this because I don't think this is something their relationship needed. I don't think this is the natural evolution of Leia's and Han's relationship. And it was it was so far the most disrespectful reading experience I've had in the expanded universe. And that sounds harsh, but it is the case. I dislike Jedi Search. You could probably tell so far from my little stream. I had a better time reading Jedi Search than reading this. This was really painful, and I'm glad that I remember enough to do a video about it because I do not want to do a 3 hour live stream on this book. I'm sorry. Um, Now this naturally evolves into my criticism of Han because Han. So basically, the Hapis cluster showers Leia with gifts to um, appeal to her a bit more and to make her think about the offer of marrying Princess Zelda. One of these gifts was basically a mind control gun, and it does exactly what you imagine. You shoot someone with this gun, and you can control their minds. So Han started, his Coruscant arc by feeling jealous, understandably so in the beginning. Um, and he wanted to basically show Leia that he's a capable man who himself could take care of her as well. So what he does is um, he basically starts finding out about his apparent royal heritage from his home planet of Corellia. And he also involves himself in a few, like in a gambling game that leads him to be the new owner of the planet of Dathomir. Not knowing that this planet is in Sinch's territory, Han goes to Leia, expecting to be praised for it, expecting to make her see the good in him, like that he's a capable man who also has resources. Leia is. That was another gut punch, really. Leia was described to be very impressed with him having this planet until she finds out that it is in Sin's territory, and then she's sad again, almost like in a belittling way, like, oh, boo-hoo, poor Han, you almost made it, but now I'm not interested again. Um, that was it just feeds into what I already said. It felt unnecessary. It felt very out of character. And coming back to the mind control gun, in basically his last ditch effort to prevent Leia from going to Hapes with Isolde, which is what she plans to do at this moment. Um, Han uses the mind control gun on Leia, kidnaps her onto the Millennium Falcon together with Chewie, and flies off towards the planet of Dathomir. Um, Now, am I supposed to say anything about this, or can we just admit that this is horrible? Like, what I feel like, and this would have been a more appropriate way of handling this. Um, let's assume that everything up to this point makes sense and is in character. And what would the Han that we know do in this situation? He gave everything for this cause. Um, the New Republic treats him like trash. We will come to that. Princess Leia treats him like trash, throws him away, because there's some other dude who she has eyes for now, who has a lot of resources. What would the Han do that we know? He would say, "Oh, you know what? Fuck off, everyone." And he would go and do his own thing again, find some other venture to go on, and forget that this existed. This is this out of character, this extreme jealousy. And like I said, the jealousy of Han is justified in this book 100% because Leia confirms all of his fears constantly. But of course, the extreme of kidnapping her is not something that Han would do. Even at his most jealous, like we know that Han was jealous in, let's say, Empire Strikes Back when she kissed Luke. But this is an exaggeration that's almost beyond measure, and I don't know why Wolverton thought this was an appropriate way of writing Han, but yes, it happened, and and I guess I have to accept now that this is something that Han would do. Now, like I said before, this leads to Han, like to one of the better decisions that Han makes throughout this book, which is leaving the his post as a New Republic general, which is definitely the correct thing to do. We'll also get to more about the New Republic. And also, yeah, no, I'm sorry. That was it. So the New Republic would be something that I come to now. Um, of course, the New Republic apparently. So this is the way that the book sets it up, is in very much need for resources. Um, at the end of, I think it was the first, or it's the second chapter. Um, Han Solo sits down to like observe the arrival of the Hapis officials and sits down next to Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma, like very coldly, without any sort of care, just turns around, looks at Han, like when Hapis comes and proposes their idea to Princess Leia, and says, "You know, for the sake of the New Republic, I hope that Princess Leia dumps you and forgets about you." And it is just one of these examples of the New Republic having a very weird, a sort of conflict with Han that is never explained. Like, Han is one of their biggest war heroes. In Return of the Jedi, he volunteered for a suicide mission that no one else volunteered for. Um, which is also something that Leia brings up. Leia, in her sort of hatred for Han in the Coruscant arc, says that Han would need to reconsider his position as a New Republic hero. It's like, no, he does not. He's the biggest hero. He's arguably one of the biggest heroes of this entire faction. And the way that he gets treated by all of the officials that he put out his neck for, like he put himself in vulnerable positions over and over again for these people, not only for the cause, but also for these people. And the way they throw it in his face and you know, try to just insult him for no apparent reason is something that I was just baffled by. And then all of this culminates in a climax for the New Republic that I think really I'm not sure, of course. I have not read further than Jedi Search, but I don't think this sort of climax can be measured, like can be challenged by anything, which is the New Republic sends Han to a diplomatic mission to the Verpines. Why do they do that? Well, they do it for a pretty obvious reasons, for two obvious reasons actually. The first reason is that, and this is described in the book, so I'm not making this up. Han is sent to this mission simply not to interfere with Leia and her getting married. He, of course, if Han isn't present, he cannot do anything about Leia going with Isolde. And one of the further goals of the New Republic, because this is the way that the Verpine mission is described, is that this mission is very dangerous and is a suicide mission, basically. So their implicit, or I would say pretty explicit hope is that Han gets killed during this mission, so that he not only cannot challenge their deal right now, but also that he can never challenge it ever. Um, this was, I'm sorry, this organization is horrible. And uh, I mean, it's used as an ironic term, but did the Empire perhaps do nothing wrong? Like, perhaps the Republic is indeed a horrible organization that deserves to be eradicated, because every page that the New Republic as a faction is described in this book wants me to believe that this is the case. And I don't understand why. I like this faction and I want there to be something interesting with this faction. But the way they specifically sent Han off to die is is so cruel. It makes it impossible for me to sympathize with this faction. Like, why would I want this faction to win? This faction seems horrible. It's a horrible organization with terrible people who send their war heroes to die when they have, when they have exceeded their position, like when they are not useful anymore. Han is in the way now, so he needs to get killed. This is the message that I receive from this whole passage, and it was genuinely it genuinely hurt almost. Like, this this was not something that I expected, and certainly not something that I want to read again. Like this was horrible. Um, and yes, another thing that I have to mention about the New Republic is that um, Leia. So basically, to ensure that Leia has all her focus on getting married, Mon Mothma offers her 8 months of holiday, basically 8 months of leave from the New Republic to fully concentrate on building up her connections with the Hapes cluster. Now keep that in mind because Mon Mothma and the New Republic are not uncharacterized at this point. They have been characterized as an organization and also as a political leader in Mon Mothma during the Thrawn trilogy. Now, what do we remember from the Thrawn trilogy? Leia was pregnant with her twins. She was highly pregnant. Like towards the end of this book, towards the end of the trilogy, she gets the children, like the twins. Mon Mothma did not leave Leia alone when she was pregnant. And like we know that being stressed throughout your pregnancy can result in serious risks for the child. And the fact that Mon Mothma did not leave Leia alone while she was highly pregnant with her twins, but she offers her 8 months of holiday to get married to Isolde is one of the it's glossed over. Like I don't think you're specifically meant to think about this a whole lot. It isn't written in the way as though you're supposed to think about it a whole lot. But this was disgusting. This was genuinely disgusting. And I felt very, like, seriously grossed out by this almost. Because there was no necessity to write this like that. And I don't know. But that's the general thought about all of the criticisms I have. There was no need to write it like that. You could have very easily just tweaked and twisted a few of the elements in the plot to essentially make more or less the same plot with different dynamics, with different relationships, and this was what we got. And I'm sorry, I'm not convinced by this. And I know a lot of people love this books, but I don't. Uh, yeah. Um. So let's go to the next thing, which would be Warlord Singe. So Warlord Singe is a character that gets introduced in this book. He famously, of course, is a bigger part of the Wraith Squadron books, which are excellent, and the portrayal of Zinj in these books is excellent as well. Zinj is not a very big part of this book, although he is one of the indirect catalysts for this plot to happen. Um, Zinj basically appears only in the last like 40 pages of this book, and he gets defeated pretty quickly and pretty unsatisfyingly. So if you've read Wraith Squadron, you know that Zinj is not defeated yet, and you're expecting a big emotional payoff for everything that we've read through with Alston's X-Wing Squad. Then you will get thoroughly disappointed by this. It was a pretty useless, pretty unnecessary villain. Um, I of course am glad what we got with him in Wraith Squadron, but this is not something I can positively attribute to Courtship of Princess Leia. He gets introduced, he gets deleted just as quickly. He's not particularly competent in this book. Definitely not in the same way he is in Alston's work. And so if you want a good portrayal of him, you are of course invited to read Wraith Squadron because they are excellent. But Singe is a nothing burger in this book. Hapes, as I've said already, like Hapes is a fascinating culture, but their necessity in this plot, specifically as a well of resources, is not established enough for me. And I mean, we talked about this more or less. Like, uh, the New Republic managed to hold off the Empire at its peak, and now they are like kind of out of nowhere in dire need for resources. I do not buy it. It's too shaky for me. Um, the next thing I would have is for the Night Sisters. The Night Sisters are, I think, best part, let's say the best new part of this book. Um, Two criticisms I do have, which are pretty, like, they're not particularly significant in any way, but I feel like I should mention them, is that Gethzarian is basically like the mistress of the Night Sisters. She's described to be so powerful that Palpatine was afraid of her. Now bear in mind, Dathomir is a very primitive jungle planet. The Night Sisters do not have any aircraft. They are not capable of flying to space. You could basically incinerate this whole planet with a single Star Destroyer, and Palpatine knows that he could do that. There's no real reason why he should be afraid of someone like Githzarian. It genuinely feels pretty. It feels rather out of character for someone like Palpatine to genuinely be afraid of someone unless they are a direct and actual threat to his reign, like Luke, for instance, would be. Gethzarian is not a threat to him. He could wipe her out at any moment. The fact that he chose not to do it is sort of baffling to me. But Gethzarian, as I said, she's not a particular big, like, it's not it doesn't have a big influence on the general plot of this book. So, uh, I thought I would mention it, but yeah, beyond that, there's nothing really to say about her. And one other little thing is Tenennial. Um, Tenennial is one of the Night Sisters. She's basically introduced like as the centerpiece of the second love triangle in this book, which would be Luke, Princess Isolde, and of course Tenennial herself. That dynamic was also a bit weird. It felt very, warm and cold. It went back pretty roughly back and forth between her being attracted to Isolde and her being attracted to Luke. Uh, I don't think it was particularly engaging, um, as little as the other love triangle in this book, but it is what it is. Tenennial herself, so she demonstrates her force powers to Luke, particularly by throwing an object. I think it was a rock, basically. It's not that important. And Luke describes that she is more apt at throwing stuff with the Force than Darth Vader was. Um, I'm sorry, no. I think Tenennial is supposed to be like uh, pretty much the age of Luke in this book. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. Like, this sounds bullshit. I think it's supposed to impress the reader, like, oh my god, she's even more powerful than Darth Vader, or at least like more capable at force throwing. I don't buy it. I don't think this is realistic, and also don't think it was a necessary part of this book. Like I said, this also doesn't have a huge bearing on the rest of the book, and probably also doesn't have a big, a big bearing on the rest of the expanded universe itself. But it is significant enough that I should mention it. Um, yes, one thing also would be like um, the mind control gun. I'm sorry, like, this is an insanely useful weapon that basically every single soldier of the Hapes cluster should have. Um, It's look, I have not read the rest of the expanded universe. Perhaps I'm wrong, but let me just say I imagine this is the sort of weapon that will never ever get mentioned again. Um, I'll just assume I'm right on this. Of course, um I am happy to be proven wrong if it happens otherwise. I don't think it does. And yeah, towards the end, I'm not sure if I mentioned that previously, but Han actually had another very nice moment, which is that the Night Sisters held a lot of innocent people hostage on Dathomir, and Han, in basically like his supposed last moments of the book, um, almost like was ready to sacrifice himself to to free the prisoners. And I thought this was one of the two very nice and appropriate character moments for Han. I genuinely liked that. And yes, maybe I think the final point of my criticism would be, and I may be a bit autistic on this, but I think it's important, the title. So the Courtship of Princess Leia, it implies like immediately when you have this title, you imply that like the actual relationship between the two is the center plot of the story. And people may argue that this is the case because their relationship sort of is the reason why they even go to Dathomir in the first place. And also, of course, the last scene in the book is Han and Leia finally getting married. But I think this is more like a tangential relation to the actual plot of the book than it being the central aspect of it. Uh, Han and Leia basically more or less break up. Isolde, of course, is sticking along on this little Dathomirian adventure with them. I remember also a scene where he groped Leia at her thigh, and she just lets it happen, and Han like watches jealously. I'm sorry, I don't believe this is. I don't believe this is something that Han would subject himself to. Um, sure, he did that in Strikes Back, but Han and Leia weren't a thing at that point yet, whereas now they are still officially boyfriend and girlfriend. They have not formally broken up. Remember this because Leia did kiss Isolde, and she did let herself be groped by him in front of Han while officially still being together with him. And yes, the actual relationship of them, like it, of course, it always sort of plays into it, but it's not very much the essential part of this book. The essential part is more or less the storyline of Luke searching for the Thor and then also fighting against Singe and freeing the prisoners towards the end. Whereas the courtship part more or less always gets tagged on, like it's an afterthought, it's a part of it, it's always try to be linked with it, but I don't think it does a like the book does a particularly good job at it. It's interesting to consider in that vein the German title of the book, which is Entführung nach Dathomir, which would translate to Abduction to Dathomir. I think that title is a lot more appropriate. The Dathomirian plotline in general is the central part of it. I think this makes a lot more sense. It is not false advertising, in my opinion. Not as much as Courtship of Princess Leia is. And I think it would have been a better title to use. Like, of course, we have that title in German, but the canon title, quote unquote, of course, is the English one. And this is the Courtship of Princess Leia. So yes, this is basically everything I have to say about this book. My final thoughts would be that, as I've said previously already, I think this was so far the most insulting and, definitely the most horrible expanded universe reading experience I've had so far. I've been bored with books. I've been, disappointed with books, but I've never felt genuinely angry throughout an entire book. And so far, Courtship is the only book that has managed this. Um, I gave this book a 3 out of 10 when I wrote a little review on Reddit. I would remain with this. Um, this this book does not sell its premise very well. The main characters are horribly mischaracterized. They behave in ways that they ought not to do, that they wouldn't do when we take into account their past iterations. Their relationships are fragmented for no real reason other than the purpose of serving the story. And overall, the good parts that people mention are, let's say, like the world building and also the humor. I'm sorry, I think the humor is very subjective. Um, Apart from C3PO, I did not feel this book being like I did not have a feeling that this book was particularly humorous. Um, so yes, the parts that people will praise, which usually is humor, let's say, and world building, it's not the essential, it's not the main part of the book. The main part of the book, judging it by its title, is the relationship between Han and Leia. And it's written so horribly that I genuinely cannot give it any more than a 3 out of 10. Um, Now, of course, if you remember, I gave Jedi Search a 3 out of 10 as well. Um, I I would say like in quality they are on par, but I definitely enjoyed Jedi Search more. Uh, Courtship of Princess Leia was a terrible reading experience, and I do not wish to ever read this book again, and I'm really honest with that. And yeah, so far that's everything I have to say. If you have anything to say about my review, please do so in the comments. And you shall be excited for my next project, which would be Firestorm and Dark Apprentice. Perhaps I'll do a video with Firestorm as well. I'm not quite sure on that yet. I also just might link it together with the Dark Apprentice live stream into one bigger one. But anyways, yep, stay tuned and I'll see you the next time.